said to him, I said, you have a lot of work ahead of you.
Oh, poor guy. All right. Okay. Good evening and welcome to the regular board meeting for the School District of Springfield Township Board of School Directors. Could we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. A reading of the mission statement. The mission of the School District of Springfield Township is to educate and develop all students as learners and citizens who are high-achieving, resilient, and responsible in a changing global community. Mr. King?
Mr. Bedard.
Here.
Mr. Chapman. Ms. Jordan.
Here.
Mr. Lapidus.
Here.
Ms. Nelson.
Here.
Mr. Rayer. Ms. Sarsfield. Ms. Slapinski. Dr. Taratusky.
Here. Are there any public comments on agenda items?
No.
Okay, seeing none. We'll have approval of the minutes, October 2nd, 2018 interim meeting, board minutes D, and October 16th, 2018 regular meeting, board minutes E. Is there a motion? A second? Any comments or questions? Okay, Mr. King?
Mr. Bedard.
Aye.
Ms. Jordan.
Aye.
Mr. Lapidus.
Aye.
Ms. Nelson.
Aye.
Dr. Taratusky.
Aye. Approval of the treasurer's report, treasurer's report C. Is there a motion?
Motion.
And a second? Any comments or questions? Okay, Mr. King?
Mr. Bedard.
Aye.
Ms. Jordan.
Aye.
Mr. Lapidus.
Aye.
Ms. Nelson.
Aye.
Dr. Taratusky.
Aye. Reports and information. Committee reports, Finance Committee, Mr. Lapidus. It's all yours. Take it away.
So in one word, riveting. Let's see. We had Mr. Mininger from Dreslin and Company. He is the auditor. He went over our books and presented his findings. I think the district did pretty well. There weren't any significant items of concern to them, and I guess our finance department is doing a wonderful job. We got an update on the TC property. It's a development that will benefit the district through increased school taxes, and I believe no impact, because it's an older population, so as of now, no impact on our schools as far as enrollment goes. We also got an update on the projects that we're working on. I think we're still on track with money. I'm not sure about timing-wise because we had some bad weather, but that's not a finance issue, so we glossed over. And finally, we talked about, not finally, because I think there's page 3. Look at that.
Put your mic on.
They might not be
able to hear you. It's not working.
No, you've silenced me forever now. Now I feel like I'm at the Politburo meeting. I should bang a shoe on the table, but see, the kids won't get it, but you guys will. I know. Thank you. Spasiba, right? Okay, so bond issuance. We're going to issue our final $10 million in bonds early next year, which should take us through the completion of all of our projects. I think we are still on track to get very favorable rates because of how well our school district is financially managed. And finally, we talked about the preliminary budget for the 1920 or 2021 school year? 1920, okay, for the 1920 school year. Talked about the index, which is 2.3%, and I'm not even going to talk about what the preliminary plans are for a tax increase because it'll alarm people unnecessarily and it'll be far lower than the 5.64%. I did? No, did I? I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry, audit services, yes, because it was so riveting as I started this off with, we decided to extend Mr. Mininger's and Dreslin Company's contract for an additional 2 years, and I believe they gave us a pretty good discount in order to for that to happen. And all that took less than an hour and 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Crickets.
We're good. That's good. Okay, we're going to have a presentation regarding project-based learning.
Actually, if you don't mind, I'm
Yeah.
going to switch the
Absolutely.
presentation and make a few brief announcements very quickly. First of all, Mr. Thorne is here with us this evening, along with our other administrators, and I just wanted to extend my thanks and appreciation to him and all of his crew in the facilities department for once again rising to the occasion with our unexpected snowfall last week. Craig, you and your guys always do a phenomenal job getting the schools ready to open and making sure everything is cleared. He called me on Thursday and was right on task in terms of saying, you know, we may need an early opening tomorrow. And that's exactly, of course, what happened. I think it caught everyone by surprise, but never takes Craig by surprise. He and the guys are always ready. So Craig, once again, thank you so much for doing all of the work you did, clearing the drives and the pathways and sidewalks so that students and staff can enter safely. And let's hope that you have no more work like that for the rest of the winter. We also want to just give a shout out to Ben Rayer, whose wife Melissa was taken to the hospital last week for an emergency. Dr. Taratusky has just informed me that she's now home and is doing exceptionally well and is on her road to recovery. Yes. So that's wonderful news. We're very happy. And of course, that's the reason why Mr. Rayer unfortunately could not be here this evening. But we just want to all send our best wishes out to Melissa Rayer and to Ben and the rest of the family. I also have an announcement. Even though Katie Braun, our Assistant Business Manager, is not here this evening, she has been recognized by the Pennsylvania Association of School Business Officials because she recently was granted status as a Pennsylvania Certified School Business Administrator. So we just wanted to congratulate Katie. When she gets back after the break, we'll congratulate her in person, of course, in our offices, but that's wonderful recognition for her. And Katie, as you know, does a wonderful job working under Mr. King, and of course, she was at our Finance Committee meeting. She's learning everything that she can about all aspects of the business department and is doing a wonderful job. So I just wanted to recognize her. So prior to the end of the evening in our presentation, I also just wanted to wish all of our Springfield Township families and community members and staff members a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. I think we all have so much to be giving thanks for, so much that we are all appreciative of. From my perspective, we have the great fortune to work in a fabulous school district with wonderful constituents. And we're very happy to be able to serve the terrific students that we get to see and work with every single day. So I know that's one of the many things I'll be giving thanks for on Thursday. So we hope everyone has a restful holiday, especially after all the cooking and cleanup is done. So on that note, we will move on to our presentation. And I just want to give a little background before I introduce our guest who's here with us this evening. Not this past week, but the week before, we took a team of teachers and administrators out to San Diego, California, to visit two different campuses of High Tech High School, one located in Point Loma, the other located in Chula Vista, which is directly across from the Mexican border. And we had the great privilege of being able to spend a significant amount of time observing classrooms, talking with staff members, both teachers and administrators, and with students who really were eager to share their stories of how they have been impacted by the project-based learning initiative that has been taking place in High Tech High for quite some time. Each board member has been given a piece of paper that defines 10 essential characteristics of project-based learning. I'm just going to quickly refer to that because I am on the microphone for those who might be watching later on by video. Relevant, meaningful ideas and tasks to research, student voice and choice with guidance from staff, prolonged investigation. In fact, the projects at High Tech High typically may last anywhere from 6 to 11 weeks. A strong driving question behind the inquiry, an interesting introduction to the inquiry, collaboration and teamwork, both on the part of the students and students working with staff and the community, I might add. They tend to be cross-curricular in nature. There is extensive teacher feedback and continuous revision. There is always a public presentation of the capstone project before an extensive audience. And of course, there are rubrics for assessment and reflection after the project has been completed. You also have at your seat information from High Tech High about High Tech High being an equity project for students, personalization, the authentic work that's done through these projects, and collaborative design. The third piece of information that you have is what High Tech High has dubbed its backwards planner for the creation of projects. And what you will see is some questioning around some of the essential areas that students are asked to fill in on this chart along with the teachers. Purpose and engagement. Why does the project matter? Why will kids want to become invested, engaged, and interested in working on this project? Essential questions. What is the driving question that students are going to be researching and trying to come up with answers for? And there is no one right answer, which is one of the hallmarks of an essential question. What is it that the students are going to be doing, creating, or building? And what are the elements that would make for a truly exciting final project? So you can look through those papers and see how a teacher can actually plan out what a 6 to 11 week project might entail. So at this point, what I'd like to do is introduce you to the individual who helped us on this journey towards project-based learning, Mr. Colin McCarthy, who is working not only with our district, but with Cheltenham, and is generously supporting our foray into project-based learning. So Colin, why don't you come forward? Tell us a little bit about your background and your interest. Yes. Mm-hmm. And how you got us interested as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for having me tonight. My name is Colin McCarthy. I work for the Avalon Foundation, which is a foundation created by my family some 30 years ago with the express purpose of giving to education, educational programs, schools, etc. One of the big recipients of a lot of that attention is LaSalle College High School, where my father went, and he was a scholarship student there and had a very successful career on Wall Street, and so very much felt like he needed to give back to the community, and has always been a major supporter of education. A little bit about myself, little background to tell you how I ended up here and why I think I probably should be here. In 2011, I received Master of Arts in Education from Arcadia. It was the culmination of a career change I had planned a couple years earlier. And in 2012, two things happened. One, I began substitute teaching, and I got a call from my father from New York City, and he said, "Have you seen the Philadelphia Inquirer story on this crazy school that's down at the Navy Yard called the Sustainability Workshop?" And my father and I are good friends. We think alike, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm going down there tomorrow," which I promptly did. Volunteered for about a half a year down there, and was their first hire the following year, and got to work at the Sustainability Workshop teaching kids to do project-based learning. And it was an amazing, transformative, wonderful experience that affects me to this day. While I was teaching down there, my father also said to me, look, you have, at this point, the most formal education in education, so why don't you handle giving grants out to different, groups that you can find in Philadelphia area or whatever or wherever, and let's keep this thing going. And that was great. I did that while then the sustainability workshop was then absorbed into the Philadelphia School District the same year that they were closing schools. So they could only hire Philadelphia School District employees, which I was not, so I had to part ways with them. I continued to do some consulting for them and ended up in around 2013, ending up at High Tech High, trying to figure out, they were at the time the only school in the United States that was a high school that could give out graduate degrees. And the Sustainability Workshop, which is now called the Workshop School, wanted to do something similar. Well, I saw High Tech High, and my life changed. Came back, pitched an idea to the foundation that, look, I hear there's this new superintendent over at Cheltenham that knows a little something about project-based learning. Why don't we go all in, give them a big grant, and see if we can't start something here, with the idea being in the future we'll do some surrounding schools. We'll try to create a little pocket of innovation here that can support each other, and it's project-based learning to start this, so let's do it. Approached Cheltenham, was received warmly, and spent, that was 2015 is when I ended up there. We spent the next year working with administrators and teacher leaders creating the outline of a project that would take a cohort of approximately 60 ninth graders and have them spend half the day full-time in project-based learning. So they'd spend the morning learning their English, their history, and their science through project-based learning. Now, Dr. Hacker covered a few things regarding what good project-based learning is. Project-based learning, if done correctly, is about authentic learning. Some of the best projects come about because people are trying to solve real-world problems. You have intense student engagement. You don't run into the problem of kids saying to you, well, when am I going to use this? Instead, they're coming to you to say, I need to learn about so-and-so because we have to do X on our project next. And we saw it, we trained the teachers, it was project-based learning from the beginning, we were all learning together. And I'm happy to say that by next year, we will have a cohort in 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, followed the following year by 12th grade. So now that we were in our second year of the cohort this year, so we have 9th grade, 10th grade, and 7th at this point, I reminded the foundation that we had said we're going to do some surrounding schools. So I got a suggestion from Dr. Marseille, who knows Dr. Hacker, set up a meeting and said, look, I want you all to become enchanted and excited by project-based learning, because we're definitely setting something up in Cheltenham. But how much better would it be if we could share resources? Because let me tell you, it's not inexpensive to learn how to teach project-based learning well. So why don't you be the next school and help us to bring this new form of teaching, 21st century form of teaching, to this area. And luckily, Dr. Hacker was very excited and said, what do you have in mind? I said, come out to High Tech High and you'll see. So where I am now, I've had the experience now of working with Cheltenham since 2015, helping them to create the program. We've run into all sorts of issues, as you always will, but it's been very exciting to fix those things. From the beginning, the Avalon Foundation was committed to actually tackling the problems that you can run into, or the issues you run into when trying to do project-based learning in a public school rather than a charter school where you might have a little more freedom. I said, look, I have the personality that I'm willing to go up against that stuff and help you figure it out. And so that's what we've been doing. And that's very much what I'm hoping to convince you all, and I think I've convinced Dr. Hacker, the great value in this type of education. Our current form of education, created in the late 1800s, trained factory workers. I don't know how many factories you pass on your way to work. I don't pass by very many factories. So it's a new age that needs a new form of education to teach skills to students that they can use in college and in the workforce. And I just want to do everything I can to continue to fiscally support, but also help with my experience to whatever degree that Springfield finds that it would work for you all to help you to go on this exciting journey.
Colin, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Colin before we move on?
I used my
just
full
wanna-
45 minutes.
My question's not necessarily, and thank you for your presentation.
Sure.
But this is just an informative conversation at this point. We're going to go back to curriculum committee with some of this, or, thank you.
Push it harder.
Wanted to just get a quick answer on, because it's super exciting.
Yes.
I love the idea of project-based learning and have seen project-based work,
Sure.
work well in the workplace. How does it affect, in the research that you've done so far, students preparing for college, and how we think about making sure our students are also preparing for entrance exams and getting
Sure.
through all the stage gates that there are?
Well, I can tell you that at High Tech High, they do absolutely no preparation for the tests, the standardized tests that the state of California gives. And they score on average 15% higher than similar students at comprehensive high schools. I think the reason is because you're teaching kids how to think and how to break down problems and how to, once you teach a student how to break down a problem, they can break down any problem. It's like that old adage, you teach a man to fish. You can give him a fish, feed him for a day, teach him how to fish, you feed him for life. It's the same idea with project-based learning. The second time I went to High Tech High, one of she was a junior, she was a tour guide, said, we don't like to get fed our information. We like to go out and get it, of course, which made us all laugh. So I have found that it does an amazing job of preparing students for the not only college, but you're making excellent citizens and excellent employees. So.
I do want to also add that we had the opportunity to meet with one of their coordinators who is responsible for helping students to transition into college. We spent a significant amount of time with him at the city campus of Point Loma. And one of the things, in addition to the statistics themselves are pretty remarkable. Their SAT scores are excellent SAT scores. We saw posters and charts in some of the buildings showing the colleges to which students are accepted, and they're no different than any high school across the country, including the finest schools throughout the country. And we had the opportunity also to speak with a number of students, and one of the questions, we asked a number of the ones who were juniors or seniors, where are you thinking about going to college? Where are you applying? What are your goals and so forth? And they all are college-oriented. I don't know if all of them will end up going, but they're all applying to multiple colleges, and they all have college in the back of their mind.
And if I'll just add one last thing, if you ask any of the, say, seniors, what do you anticipate? Do you think this is going to be difficult for you? They worry about the same thing. They said, well, I've never sat in a hall with 300 kids and taken notes, but I can do that. I can figure that out. One of the other things, if you remember, that you hear a lot from that the administrators and the teachers brag about is that High Tech High kids are the ones who go to every, what is it called? Office hour of professors. Why? Once again, they've been given the tools to learn how to get to the bottom of something. And someone taught them early on, well, look, you get a free resource here. Why wouldn't you do it? And as a whole, that's what they do. So it's not, don't claim it to be the end-all, be-all, but I believe it is an important part of what's happening in today's world where, you hear statistics that 50% of the jobs that third graders are going to have offered to them have not even been created yet, have not been thought up, those type of figures. And I think this type of education, you ask the kids, I just went to an exhibition yesterday at Cheltenham, they love it. They love it, so.
Sorry, can I ask? So, does this program then focus mostly on children who are college-bound as opposed to kids who may not be the college-bound?
No, one of the things that Avalon Foundation thought was important was that the program accurately represent the racial demographics of the student body as a whole. We didn't want it to become an elite program. We didn't want it to become a dumping ground. So you get all kinds of students in it. Again, because you are teaching these kids to collaborate, okay, to think for themselves, to think outside the box, if they don't go to college and they pick some other career, they're going to be an excellent employee. Why? Because they're learning the things we all probably started learning mostly at the end of college or in graduate school or in the beginning of our work, which was that the world is made up of projects, to one extent or another.
What are some of the successes that you're seeing at Cheltenham? Because you had mentioned about project-based learning, kind of integrating it with the public school curriculum. So
Well,
what are you seeing there with regard to that?
It's mostly anecdotal at this point. But, when I go there, they know who I am. I'm asking in-depth questions. What's the difference? I saw a 10th grade presentation a couple days ago, and these kids had been in the 9th grade, and they had moved up. And I said, so what's the difference? They said, well, we know what we're doing now. So kids come in here and just get to work. Much less drama. And then a student named Imani, she expressed something to me, a skill that she had developed, and I said, had something to do with communication. I said, do you think you would have learned as much if it weren't project-based learning? And she said, no, not at all. That's what we do here. I'm sorry that I can't remember the example. So anecdotally, the engagement is through the roof. Kids who normally are sitting at the back of the class, there's no real way to sit in the back of the class in project-based learning, which is I think a great thing. And then at the same time, they get the second half of the day or first half of the day to take their language or their music or their dance or theater or whatever. So that's the model we've been using. It's certainly not the only model. Cohorts are not the only way to do it. In fact, I'm excited to discover other ways to do it and work with this school district if the cohort is not the way they want to go. But anecdotally, we're seeing the kids love it, and we had a group of students who weren't part of the 9th grade who became part of the 10th grade, and a gentleman named Sam thinking about college now. That could be because he knew who I was and he wants to say nice things to me, but that's what he said. Is that it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Colin,
Thank you so much for having me and letting me speak to you. I look forward to getting to know all of you, and I appreciate it.
Thanks, Colin.
Thank you for your generosity towards
Sure,
our
absolutely.
administration and helping them to learn about
Yeah, well,
this.
there's more on its way as we try to do our best to expose you to something that I think will be transformative in the long run. So,
Thank you, Colin. So I'd like for you all to hear from each of the members of our team that went out to San Diego. And the first person that I'd like to call upon is really a pioneer, because he said yes when he was tapped on the shoulder by his principal. And he said, all right, I'm in. And he said this early on. And he came with us, and we're counting on him to begin some things for us later on in the year. So, Pat, why don't you come on up? I'm assuming you recovered from the plane ride home.
Finally, yeah.
Good.
I can finally smell food again. Hello, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Pat Kelly. I'm a teacher at the middle school, teach social studies and ELA, and just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to go to San Diego for that wonderful trip and to see project-based learning in action. And I'll be honest, when I went on the trip, I was skeptical. Whenever you hear about like a new quote-unquote initiative or something that's going to go down, there's a lot of trepidation, and I was worried that I was going to go in and I was going to see these kids that there was something in the water, and they're different from us in some way. I was going to see teachers who were doing things that we just couldn't replicate here. And from the very first day, all of that was just blown out of the water. The biggest thing that caught my attention was that these are students just like our students. Like, I was having interactions with these middle school kids that I could, if I closed my eyes, I could have been like I was in my own classroom just right down the street. So that, on a personal level, made me feel a lot more at ease, like, okay, maybe there is something of value that we can really take out of this experience and something that we can apply at Springfield, regardless of which direction we as a district decide to go with. Even personally, as a teacher, there's some things I can take out of it. So one thing that I was struck by was the projects themselves were, they encompassed a lot of different skills. So, for example, there was this project that was all about colonization of planets. And so in science class, students learned about the solar system. They learned about galaxies. They learned about the different stressors that would be put on the human body when we're outside of our own environment. And so, like, if we're going to make a colony on Mars, what are the types of things that we need to survive? So they learned all about that in science class. Then in humanities, which is their social studies and ELA combination, they learned about historical colonization. So how did the colonization of different countries, how did that happen on Earth? And how might that translate to the stars? Even more than that, they learned about different government structures and, okay, if this is your colony, what's going to be the government that best works for your colony? And the teachers just worked together to put together this robust project that took, I believe it was 9 weeks for this particular project. And the level of collaboration among the teachers, I thought, was astounding. And not only that, but the ownership that the students took of that project and all the projects that we saw, I thought, was something that we can take away and that I actually have tried to start thinking of ways to implement it in my classroom following the Thanksgiving break. It's funny, there was a colleague, and I don't want to say her name because I don't know if she wants me to everybody know this yet, but today at conferences, there was a break, and she found me in the hallway and was like, hey, so I'm doing a unit on this in science class. Do you think that there might be a way that we can incorporate social studies and science into one big project and maybe make like a catapult or something? And she had no idea that we were going to be talking about project-based learning tonight, and I was just like, yes, absolutely, we can do that. I think a catapult might be a bit much, but we'll find something. So that's something that has me excited personally. That
Make sure Mr. Fuller gets her name.
yeah, I let him know already. Yeah. So if you see a large-scale catapult in the football fields, don't worry. It's a project, I promise. We'll try to avoid the parking lot. But really, I think that this is something that can be really valuable for our students. I saw students asking questions and getting engaged in a way that just really made me feel good. And there's really not many words that you can put to that feeling. Like when you see a student connecting the dots and having that aha moment, and you see it across the classroom, that's powerful. And so I was really thankful to be able to be a part of that experience and to see that, and it kind of reinvigorated me moving forward and as a way to kind of reanalyze my own teaching. So again, thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Pat. That was terrific.
Thank you. Any questions or? All right, thank you. Yeah, I'm sure.
All right, Katie, why don't you come on up? And one thing, just before Katie Maas, our instructional coach, speaks about her experience and what she took away, I do want to point out that the model that we saw at Cheltenham, the models that we saw at High Tech High, are wonderful models to learn from, but don't necessarily have to be the models that we develop here within our own framework. All school districts are different. They have different constraints, or they have different practices or procedures. And so that's one of the conversations that we're continuing to have as we move forward, is which model will work best for us so that we can move forward successfully. But I was certainly happy to hear that Pat is already thinking about this and what he can do even in his own classroom. So Katie?
Thanks. I'm Katie Maas. I'm one of the instructional coaches in our district. And to Dr. Hacker's point and sort of what I just heard Pat say, a phrase we heard them say on the first day is inspiration, not replication. And that was something that sort of resonated with all of us, because It was,
Number
it was
one
on
on
your
my
postcard,
card.
yes. They had us write postcards when we were at the Chula Vista campus to ourselves, like notes of inspiration, things we wanted to remember. And I think all of ours got delivered yesterday. Zach might have just said his didn't come yet. But yeah, so the idea of inspiration, not replication, I think resonated with us because we all felt this level of comfort. Like, we don't necessarily need to replicate exactly what's happening at their campus or even at Cheltenham, like Dr. Hacker said, to be able to take some of those elements of PBL and infuse them into our district. So for me, a big takeaway was this sort of culture of professional learning, collaboration, and support amongst the staff. In my role as a coach, that sort of resonated with me, that when you're embarking upon this sort of shift in the way that we think about teaching and learning, I think it's important to have a tremendous amount of support so that we can do it successfully. And we heard Dr. Hacker say several times throughout the time we were there that whichever teachers sort of sign up and are willing to sort of engage in this process, it's not a like, we got to see what you're doing all the time. It's a more, we want to come in sort of trial by fire a little bit, because that's what it is, and it's okay to fail. And I think that is a big part of the PBL culture, that we're learning together and we're trying and doing new things. So it was really explicit, that culture amongst that staff of collaboration with one another. The Space Colony project that Pat mentioned was incredible, and a piece of that too was not only the collaboration but the autonomy of the teachers to create that project. When they talked about where that sparked from, it was personal interest, that they were like, we're space geeks, we just wanted to learn more about this. And what was cool is they were able to take something that resonated with them, pass it on to the students. And so we did some sort of probing questions. Well, what about a kid that's not interested in science fiction, and how do you sort of align that with what you're doing? So in addition to sort of a lot of teacher autonomy, there's a lot of student voice and choice in ways that they can make it authentic. So if I'm someone that were to enter that Space Colony project and not be a science fiction or space person, which I'm not, there's a role for me, and perhaps that's more in like the fiction writing of what's happening and the narratives, the historical fiction narratives that they're creating about these colonies. So I think the autonomy on the teacher end, as well as sort of the student piece, was really, really, that came through loud and clear. In addition, which I think some of the other colleagues are going to talk about, is just, it's like the most visually striking buildings that you could ever be in. So that was a really neat thing to walk away with. I think that's sort of what I wanted to share. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
All right, Zach Fuller, why don't you come on up?
Hi, everybody. How are you? I'm good. I had three things that I was going to talk about because I didn't know what other people were going to say. So thankfully, I have one that remains, which is this idea of authenticity. And so we talked a lot while we were there about, what is the difference between a project like this, like what we're seeing here, and something that we might call a project like, for example, the science fair project at the middle school, or some of the other more traditional projects that we do. And what we wound up saying was this idea of authenticity that's brought on by this authentic audience for the work, right? And so one example of that is the senior that I was talking to over lunch one day was telling me about his favorite project, which was working with the Innocence Project in California to review case files, right? And so he and his senior class were learning about what is proof and what is evidence by working with this the Innocence Project to review people's appeals, case files, and make a recommendation for whether or not the Innocence Project should take on that case. We had middle school students who were writing, they had client second graders for whom they were writing storybooks and designing nightlights. We had high school students making a tiny house for an artist in San Francisco based on that artist's specifications. I mean, it was really amazing to see the pride in their work and their willingness to talk about their work and the meaning they found in their work, because they were making their work for either presentation or use by some authentic, real person somewhere in the world, which is different from a lot of schoolwork that we do, right? A lot of schoolwork gets read, graded, assessed, and given back, and then it winds up in the circular file. So it was good to see that kind of meaning. So that's what I took away from it. Thank you.
Thanks, Zach. Chuck?
everybody. So just a couple of my takeaways. One, the trip was awesome. It just was really great to see how other schools approached their educational program, and it was visually striking. There was something on the walls, the floors, the ceilings, all over the place, and it was really beautiful. The one thing I like about PBL, it's connected and linked with real-world problems. We drove 30 minutes to the Chula Vista campus, and it's at the Mexican-California border. And you can see into Mexico from the school, which was really, really cool. And some of the students I were talking about, it was a history government class. They're talking about immigration issues, which is where they live, and it's certainly an issue in our country. And they seem to be very interested in it because it's a current, relevant problem, and certainly a conversation. And I just thought they were very well versed in the topic, interested, and certainly connected. The second thing, and Dr. Hacker mentioned already, but it gives choice and voice in your educational program. You can really kind of self-guide your program and create your own path versus a worksheet that you complete and hand in. If you're doing a project, they were talking about famous civil rights leaders, and it was A through Z with a papier-mâché A with different leaders, and then an article about that, and it was publicly displayed in the hallway. And you could tell that the students were able to choose who they would, who they would research. And they were my two big takeaways. I really liked too. They didn't have a bell schedule, because the kids were pretty independent. They called it the un-bell schedule. And of course, principals, that is like a no-no to not have a bell schedule. And I'm like, where's the bell today? But the school functioned as well as our school, and there was no bells ringing, and they didn't have announcements during the day, which I thought was interesting, because they just had a different approach to how they completed their educational program. And students were in the hallways working independently outside the classrooms, and it just gave, like I said, some students kind of more choice and voice in what they did. But it was, it's very impressive, and I look how we can apply it here. I've already had conversations with my business and computer science teachers who independently approached me, whose classrooms are right back here. They said, we feel it's odd giving a test on programming. Why wouldn't we have a project on programming or something like that? And they seem very interested in as we go forward. But I appreciate the opportunity. It was very nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck.
Happy Thanksgiving.
It's a charter school. Mary Jo.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to just start by thanking Colin and all of you. I think that giving the administrative team and members of our faculty the opportunity to travel and see innovation in another school system was really valuable. And I appreciate the fact that it demonstrates your commitment to continued educational growth. I also want to just reiterate one thing that Katie said, and that was the very first day there was a director who said inspiration, not replication, about this program, and in particular highlighted that it is not a canned program, and that there is great flexibility in our opportunity to bring back the best of what we saw and apply it to our own school system. So that was really valuable and helpful for me, who went there with a lot of questions about how project-based learning could work in our community. I also was really struck by the use of essential questions to drive instruction. Visually, as has already been mentioned, it was pretty significant to see these projects in their fulfillment on the walls and hanging from the ceilings. One project that struck me was a project where middle schoolers were taking a look at what would the topographical changes be in the San Diego area with rising sea levels. And they looked at 2 feet, 4 feet, 6 feet rising sea levels, all anticipated in their lifetime, and took a look at what their neighborhoods would look like and their community would look like. And so that interdisciplinary project and the fact that it was driven by an essential question really struck me. And the other item from my vantage point here was their significant commitment to professional development for their teaching staff. They have something called a Summer Odyssey, where their new teachers spend 3 weeks in the summer in professional development before they set foot in a classroom. 1 full week just among first-year teachers, a second week with novice teachers, and a third week with the full faculty. And that in and of itself was a significant commitment. But then beyond that, they schedule the first hour of the day every day for faculty collaboration. They have a different focused meeting every morning of the week. And that really gives them a chance to share ideas and strategies with students, and to make contact with, one of the meetings every week is just to make contact with families. And then every other Wednesday, they have a half day for students. In the classroom, the students have extracurricular activities, but the teachers have 6 hours a month, 3 hours every other week, just to work collaboratively. And I was struck. I've never seen a school system that had that degree of commitment to professional development ongoing, and it was meaningful for me to see. So I really enjoyed the visit, and I thank you again for the opportunity.
Thanks, Mary Jo. I think what that tells you also is how much value they place in collaboration in terms of teachers working together to continually reflect on their work, talk about how can we improve what we're doing, sharing ideas, reflecting back on what could we have done differently, what could we have done better. And similarly, the students are engaged in that level of collaboration about their projects and their learning as well. And as you heard mentioned, in order for a project to be successful, not all students are doing the same work at the same time. In the example that Katie mentioned, she could have been the videographer. She has an interest in filmmaking. She could have documented how do we develop this project and bring it to culmination in front of an audience as her role in terms of the development of the project. So not every student is always working on the same aspect, but yet they are contributing to the project as a whole. And finally, I think the thing that's really significant, and Colin himself mentioned he had just come from exhibition, is this notion of exhibition. And exhibition is more than just inviting in your class of parents to come in. It's inviting everyone in because the students are so proud of the work and they're so invested in terms of what they have been able to create that everyone is invited in, and it's so much more holistic. So that was a huge, I think, takeaway for all of us. I do want to remind everyone that this is a charter school, so they do operate without a lot of the structures and constraints that we have in place in a public school. Teachers have a 1-year contract every single year, and they can be let go at the end of that year. So there's no opportunity for burnout. You are only as good as your continued motivation and interest, and they're held to a very high standard, but we met a number of staff members who've been there for a very long period of time and say, this is what changed me, is coming to a place like this to work. So it certainly was empowering for us to see that and learn what can be done. We are not looking to put a round peg in a square hole. We're looking to find what works for us here. But fortunately, we were able to bring back so many wonderful ideas. And again, we're just very grateful to have had the opportunity. And we'll dive right back in terms of our discussions right after the break. Thank you all for letting us present to you tonight. Colin.
Because Cheltenham has the same bureaucratic constraints that we do. I mean, how are they handling? I don't know if you understand what I'm saying.
Yes.
The unions and then the state regulations, all of that.
I have to kind of defer and say, I will give a very incomplete answer. I do know that they have stretched themselves. And they have had meetings of, okay, so how can we make this particular thing, which we think is important, fit for our school? I know the director of curriculum is involved in everything. In fact, she was one of the early converts who was like, yes, there's something here that we can do. And, she's a stickler. So they are meeting their requirements, but they are finding ways and looking to the future and saying, what are some other ways we can do some things in the future? There's talk that assessments, state assessments for project-based learning, that there are better things to use than things like the Keystone. Now, I'm not suggesting that they're changing that anytime soon, but they're looking. So and again, that's what I signed up for, was let's struggle with these things. Let's try 3 different things, and if they don't work, let's go to the 4th thing. So hopefully that'll answer. Okay, thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being here tonight.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much, Dr. Hacker. We appreciate it. Sounds like an exciting trip. I have so many questions in my head. I just want to keep talking about it, but
There will
this
be
is
more
not the
discussions, I
time.
promise.
Okay, good. Okay, let's move on to new business. Number 1, personnel. The Board of School Directors approves the following personnel as presented in the attachment: certificated personnel, support personnel, temporary personnel, extra pay for extra responsibilities, and conference workshop attendance. Is there a motion? Motion. And a second? Any comments or questions? Mr. King?
Mr. Bedard.
Aye.
Ms. Jordan.
Aye.
Mr. Lapidus. Ms. Nelson.
Aye.
Dr. Taratusky.
Aye. Number 2, safe harbor. The Board of School Directors approves the agreement between the School District of Springfield Township and Safe Harbor for an in-school safe harbor peer support group for middle school students for an 8-week period, date to be determined, at no cost to the district. Is there a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions? Mr. King?
Mr. Bedard.
Aye.
Ms. Jordan. Mr. Lapidus.
Aye.
Ms. Nelson.
Aye.
Dr. Taratusky.
Aye. Number 3, scenario learning. The Board of School Directors approves the addition of the Exceptional Child Course Library to the contract with Scenario Learning LLC to provide online trainings to the district for education and compliance effective November 6, 2018. Is there a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions? Mr. King?
Mr. Bedard.
Aye.
Ms. Jordan.
Aye.
Mr. Lapidus.
Aye.
Ms. Nelson.
Aye.
Dr. Taratusky.
Aye. Number 4, Township Parks and Recreation donation. The Board of School Directors approves a donation from the Township Parks and Recreation Department for field maintenance of the district athletic soccer fields in the amount of $750. Is there a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions? Mr. King?
Mr. Bedard.
Aye.
Ms. Jordan.
Aye.
Mr. Lapidus.
Aye.
Ms. Nelson.
Aye.
Dr. Taratusky.
Aye. And we extend our thanks to the township for that donation. Number 5, New Hope Academy. The Board of School Directors approves the tuition contract between the School District of Springfield Township and the New Hope Academy for the 2018-19 school year for student 201-81120-01. Is there a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions? Mr. King?
Mr. Bedard.
Aye.
Ms. Jordan.
Aye.
Mr. Lapidus.
Aye.
Ms. Nelson.
Aye.
Dr. Taratusky.
Aye. Revision of Policy 323, Tobacco. The Board of School Directors approves the revisions to Policy 323, Tobacco, per the Attachment X. Is there a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions?
I have a comment. There we go. I don't know if anyone happened to see, but there was a very large article in the New York Times this weekend about Juul and vaping. And this policy, which is for staff, the board approved a policy for students the previous month. It was very compelling reading in terms of the dangers of Juul, how addicting it can be, that people believe because it's a substitute for cigarettes that it might be safe because it's masked by flavors. But we do want to issue a warning out to parents as well as to our entire student body that we do not consider it to be beneficial in any way for students, and that on school property it is not permissible, and students will be subject to disciplinary consequences. But beyond that, we believe it's really important for parents to have good conversations with their kids about these products.
We have a motion. Mr. King?
Mr. Bedard.
Aye.
Ms. Jordan.
Aye.
Mr. Lapidus.
Aye.
Ms. Nelson.
Aye.
Dr. Tarantusky.
Aye. Number 7, Program Review Service Agreement. Board of School Directors approves the K-12 English Language Development Program Review Agreement between the School District of Springfield Township and the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit 23 from November 2018 to March 2019 for a discounted Title III consortium price of $6,000. Is there a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions? Mr. King?
Mr. Bedard.
Aye.
Ms. Jordan.
Aye.
Mr. Lapidus.
Aye.
Ms. Nelson.
Aye.
Dr. Tarantusky.
Aye. Number 8, Appointment Plus. The Board of School Directors approves the annual subscription for Appointment Plus software between Storm Source LLC and the School District of Springfield Township for 1 year at a cost of $699. Is there a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions?
Quick comment, just to let everyone know what this software is. It will readily speed up the process for making appointments, for registrations, for getting clearances, for coming in as new students into the district. You can do everything now online. You no longer will have to call the school district and speak with Heidi Fallon, who is our receptionist and who handles registration. You can just go online, get an appointment, get confirmation by email as well, get paperwork online, so it's really a phenomenal system at a very low cost.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Mr. King?
Mr. Bedard.
Aye.
Ms. Jordan.
Aye.
Mr. Lapidus.
Aye.
Ms. Nelson.
Aye.
Dr. Tarantusky.
Aye. Number 9, Interface Systems, Inc. The Board of School Directors approves the statement of work for WMware vSphere upgrade and new host creation between the School District of Springfield Township and Interface Systems, Inc. in the amount of $5,250. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Any comments or questions? I have a question about what this software is for.
It's for a virtual server.
Okay, all right.
This is a very
King?
technical document.
Yes. Don't ask me to explain it. I can tell you what it's for, but I cannot explain it.
In English.
Mr. King?
Mr. Bedard.
Aye.
Ms. Jordan.
Aye.
Mr. Lapidus.
Aye.
Ms. Nelson.
Aye.
Dr. Tarantusky.
Aye. Number 10, Extension of Auditing Services. The Board of School Directors approves the Finance Committee's recommendation to extend the appointment of Dreslin and Company as independent auditor for an additional 2-year term as per the attached proposal, Attachment Y. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Any comments or questions? Mr. King?
Mr. Bedard.
Aye.
Ms. Jordan.
Aye.
Mr. Lapidus.
Aye.
Ms. Nelson.
Aye.
Dr. Tarantusky.
Aye. Number 11, Audit Report and Year-End 6/30/18. The Board of School Directors approves the Finance Committee's recommendation to accept the audit report for year-end June 30th, 2018, as prepared by Dreslin and Company for the School District of Springfield Township. Is there a motion? And a second? Any comments or questions? Who was the second? Did I get a
I'll
second?
second.
Okay, Walter second. I'm just moving right along. Nobody second.
Okay, all approved. Move on.
Mr. King.
Mr. Bedard.
Aye.
Ms. Jordan.
Aye.
Mr. Lapidus.
Aye.
Ms. Nelson.
Aye.
Dr. Tarantusky.
Aye. Number 12, Parameters Motion. The Board of School Directors approves the resolution authorizing the issuance of the General Obligation Bonds, Series 2019, and authorizes the administration to work with Public Financial Management as financial advisor, Fox Rothschild LLP as bond counsel, and the local solicitor to fund various capital projects as approved by the Finance Committee. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Second. Thank you. Any comments or questions? Okay. Mr. King.
Mr. Bedard.
Aye.
Ms. Jordan.
Aye.
Mr. Lapidus.
Aye.
Ms. Nelson. Dr. Teretuski.
Aye. Any public comments on non-agenda items? Future meeting dates, the reorganization school board meeting will be held Tuesday, December 4th at 7 p.m. in the Freeze Memorial Lobby, and there will be an interim board meeting on Wednesday, January 2nd at 7 p.m. in the Freeze Memorial Lobby. That's a tentative date. There are no board committee meetings scheduled at this time?
No, we're looking to try to schedule a property committee meeting.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you very much. We're all adjourned.
Thanks, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.